Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Transportation Policy Leadership Group. As you see, we have a very full agenda this afternoon. I will be watching the clock because we have had people fly in for this and everything. I want to respect their time and make sure they have time to speak with you. So if you will bear with me on that, if we run out of time on any person, we can certainly invite them back if you so choose. We'd like to begin today with some brief discussions by the manager's administrator, just to talk about some points that we've heard. And I'll introduce them. They'll speak to you, give you a couple of minute overview of things. One of the points that folks have asked us about in the process is we've done this before. Is this any different? And we believe this is a different process. And I'm going to ask Greg Hordell from Plant City to address that. So, Greg.
Thank you, Herb. My name, for the record, is Greg Horwedel. I'm the city manager of Plant City. Am I good? Okay, good. Thank you. One of the things that we've heard as part of this effort is that this is something that's already been done before, and I would respectfully disagree with that. I think this initiative, as I've mentioned to several of you, is new because we have all the players at the table and we are focused on definable, discernible goals, and that is creating jobs and fostering economic development in a very productive way all throughout Hillsborough County. We have, I think, the horsepower, if you will, at the table here, as well as the managers group that is meeting and our staffs are all working together in combination to make sure that this effort is a success. I really don't believe that there's anything that can stand in our way. If we set our minds to something, as Mayor Buckhorn is famous for saying, this is our time, I truly believe that for transportation issues, this is our time. This is something that Commissioner Sharp, you've been working on for a long time. Vice Mayor Lott, I know you've spent a lot of time on transportation issues over the years, and many of you have had a vested interest in making sure that we have transportation plans that support our community. Well, in this sense, supporting our community means getting the public participation, making sure that we fold that into the plans that the staff is working on, coming up with financing for what we decide is in the best interest of our collective community. I'd really like to close by noting, many of you have heard the parable of the sticks, and really it's quite simple. You have a single stick and it's easy to break that. While we have a number of sticks in play throughout the county, some of them bigger than others, collectively, if we work together, we are a formidable force. And I know from staff's perspective and from the comments that I hear from the community, they are excited by this effort. They know that this can be done. And I'm convinced at the end of the day, we're going to have an effort that has real, meaningful, and tangible results, not just for all of us sitting around in this room, but for our business owners and those who are looking to have a job in another 5 years. So from the staff perspective, we're extremely excited with this effort. We know that there's going to be a lot of public participation. We're confident that that's going to yield a very good plan. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Greg. Another question we've heard is how we're going to ensure this is a financially responsible project, and Phil Hart will address that. Phil?
Philip Hale, I'm the CEO of Hart. I'm pleased that you asked me to talk about financial responsibility since that's my favorite subject. It's important that the not just this board or this working group, but also what I feel is very important is that the public has trust in the process. Trust in the process goes toward one thing, and that's true financial responsibility. So we're going to try to identify the transportation investments which really meet the need and examine the most cost-effective way of doing it. Hart historically has, over the last several years, has worked very hard to meet the need with limited funds, but we also are meeting the need at the point that our ridership has grown considerably. The other thing that we're going to do is comparison shop. In other words, what's the best method? And we're going to look around and see what's the best way of doing it. But the most important approach I see is, as with any government entity or any type of this process, is public confidence. And public confidence comes from the intent of public input, let everybody have their say, and have an understanding, after all is said and done, that this is the best way to address this specific issue, which is the transportation challenges that impact Hillsborough County. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Been a lot of requests from everyone for what's the time frame, when are decisions going to get made, et cetera. Mike Merrill's going to address that.
Thanks, Herb. We've heard three important themes, I think. One is this is a unified collaborative effort. For the first time, we have all of the decision makers and all the horsepower in the room together making a unified effort. Second important theme is we're creating value. So just as Apple Computer had a culture of value creation, Disney has a culture of value creation, we have that same theme going here, and it's value by way of the pathways of economic development and jobs, and finding the right tool to get us there. Third theme, that you heard, is financial feasibility in bringing this plan forward. So how do we take all of the good energy of this group and all of the horsepower and all of the intention and translate it into an action step? And so the most important word on this chart, I want to start with, is conceptual. So I don't want anybody here to think that somehow this has already been determined, but someone has to sort of say, well, what does this look like? How do we take the work of this fine group and translate it into action? So I think there's four things that we have to address. First, the what and the where. Who's going to do it? How are we going to do it? And when are we going to do it? And those fall into four basic areas. So the what and the where is really what's happening now. We're trying to identify what we're calling the economic sparks, those things that are going to ignite jobs, ignite corporate relocations, and the transportation spine that's going to get people to and from those economic spark areas. So we're talking about regional, sub-regional, local transportation assets that have to be identified in order for us to move forward with an action plan. So we talk about those in terms of economic spaces and EDAs. Second step, I think, is probably the most important because of the unified effort that's here. How do we carry this unified effort forward in a way that we don't then go back to our silos, we don't go back to our homes and lose that collaborative effort? And that talks about governance. And I'm not here to tell you what the solution is for governance, except that somehow we have to vest decision-making and accountability for financing and constructing and operating the spine, the transportation spine, in some way so that there is accountability, there are deliverables going forward. So the important attributes we have to be thinking about is it's a governance structure that implements county-wide transportation and funding solutions. It's not duplicative of any other agency that currently exists. It's supported by existing planning organizations, MPO, Planning Commission, others. And it's the interface to the federal, state, and regional partners that bring funding and bring transportation solutions. So then we say, how are we going to do this? And really, the thing that works best for those of you who run businesses and all my departments who've been doing business plans is, let's develop a business plan. Different from a strategic plan. A business plan is on the ground, tactics, resources, strategy, and execution of delivering the transportation spine. And then the when. This is a long-term effort that will never cease. It evolves, it will continue to grow, but we have to show some short-term wins. And as difficult as it may seem, I don't think it is that difficult to deliver some short-term demonstration projects by leveraging partner agencies that are currently working on transportation solutions. So the dates here, this is conceptual as I said, but we need something to shoot for. This is for your discussion as a group. I'm just laying it out as a something to think about, something to vision, and something to inspire all of us to move forward with. So with that, turn it over to her.
All three of the managers spoke about the importance of public engagement, public input, and we have a very extensive plan about that. Jerry Sieber of Temple Terrace is going to share with you the outline of it.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Jerry Sieber, City Manager in Temple Terrace. As my colleagues have shared with you, and as you've heard before, we really have an opportunity to engage a variety of constituents in this conversation about transportation and the impact on economic development all across the county. And you heard one of my colleagues say a moment ago that we really have an opportunity to build trust in the process along the way. It starts with conversations with you. It starts with conversations with my city council and with the other city councils in our county. It also includes conversations with the MPO members, with the members of the Hillsborough County Planning Commission, the Port Authority, the Airport Authority, and other policymakers who have a stake in this. It includes talking to civic groups. Mayor Trelaw and I know who we need to talk to in our community. I'll bet you know who to talk to in your area as well. And they have to be touched and contacted in this process as well. We also need to talk to our state legislative delegation. We don't know where this effort is going to take us precisely, but I know that they have a curious interest in what we're doing and likely have a big stake in what we're going to do going forward. We also envision a number of public forums to engage the public in a variety of ways. We had one last month. We have several more that are scheduled over the fall. And rather than just an opportunity to exchange information back and forth, I look at it, and I think we all look at it as an opportunity to try and listen to folks at the public forums and try to understand their aspirations, because that's very important as we move this effort forward. Needless to say, we'll be using our website materials as well to communicate with folks who can't make it to public forums or can't make it to these kind of meetings. We will have to engage the media. That starts later this week. We have some meetings scheduled with editorial boards, but it also means talking on a regular basis with the reporters who cover this and ensuring that they understand what we're about and what we're doing. I think we have to think about using some different tools to engage the public, because as I shared with you earlier, not just exchanging information like you might do at a public hearing or a town hall meeting, but look for opportunities to hear what they have to say and to incorporate that into the work that we're doing, because we have to do something that was mentioned a few moments ago, and that's gain public confidence, not only in the process, but in the results of the work that we're doing. Because I think we have the opportunity, as my colleague from Plant City said, to achieve some meaningful, tangible results to help us ensure the continued prosperity of the Tampa Bay region.
Thank you. Any questions of the managers before we move to the next item? Okay. In our last meeting, we brought some folks in to share with you the perspectives of people who primarily are businesses move people. And so we wanted to bring two additional perspectives today. One, those businesses that are primarily concerned with the movement of product. And then secondly, those businesses that are professional services that look at relocation and how they value community. So first we're going to talk with the manufacturing folks here. And in a moment I'll ask them to introduce themselves with the elevator speech. And then I'll come back and ask them to make a brief opening statement. But what we're really trying to understand here is, you know, given we talk about a manufacturing renaissance in our nation, how can this county take advantage of that? What sort of transportation infrastructure is needed for this county to be able to take advantage of that? And that's the purpose of this immediate discussion here. So first let me ask our manufacturers to introduce themselves. Steve, I can start with you.
Sure. My name's Steve Meitzen, past president of the Bay Area Manufacturers Association, and currently on the board. I work for a extruder, and for those of you that look really excited right now as I look around the room, think of the Play-Doh factory. So it's an honor to be here with such a great group, and I hope that my observations aid you in this very important task.
Okay. Let me make one comment for everybody. When you speak, if you will, move the microphone in front of you, if you will. And let me apologize to Mayor Lott, Vice Mayor. Well, to welcome you. He's the new Plant City representative. I think most of you know him, so I didn't think he needed an introduction to you, but we do welcome you. So, Ken?
Ken Jorgensmeyer with Heat Pipe Technology. I'm the Director of Engineering and Operations. We're new to the area. We have been here since November, and there was a lot of pluses to the area. We could have chosen numerous different locations, but we chose Tampa for numerous different reasons, everything from transportation to workforce personnel. And so we can get into that a little bit later, but it's an exciting time for us to be here in Tampa.
And Hillsborough County's gain was Alachua County's loss because they originated in Alachua County, but more power to you. That's not from Newberry. Tom?
I'm Tom Morris. I'm with Plastipack Packaging. Plastipack is a manufacturer of plastic bottles. We're the third largest manufacturer in North America, global organization with 14 sites in the States and 9 now overseas. We've been in the Plant City area for a little over 11 years now and have grown significantly. We make about 1 billion containers a day at our facility and are pleased to be a part of the process.
Okay. That's a lot of containers. Hey. Well, let me ask each of you, and Steve, start with you, sort of brief opening statement. You know, when you think about manufacturing, what's important from a transportation perspective, if you would?
Well, the first thing is with manufacturers, you're going to talk to a bunch of us. I'd encourage all of you, at least once a month, go visit a factory if you're not doing it now. Get to know this renaissance. Ask them the questions about transportation. Hear from them. Because if you talk to 12, you'll probably get 12 different answers. And that's because each of us has a unique perspective. You know, from a large blow molder over there to an extruder, we've been here for 30 years. Transportation for our organization is, can I get through that light on Ulmerton Road without having to get another cup of coffee? To a more sophisticated company, it could be, how fast can I get to the interstate with my finished product and get it out of state? Or for some individuals, I can get my third shift to work, but I can't get them home because of public transportation. So those are kind of the challenges that we face as manufacturers, and there's a bunch of others out there. Okay. So that would be what I think.
Okay. Kent?
Now, part of the reason for us to be here is that we need all different modes of transportation. We need to be close to an international airport because we bring in a lot of our customers in to see our product. We have a demonstration center in our facility, and it cuts out about 4 hours of their transportation time to go from either Orlando to Gainesville or Tampa to Gainesville. So it makes it much more convenient for them. We get a lot more customers in. So it's very important to have an international airport of the caliber of Tampa here. The other thing that was very interesting to us, and very important to us, is that where we were previously located was on 75, and so most of our goods do go north. There is a little bit that does go south down to Miami, but most of it goes north. And so if you're hung up on 75 highway heading north, and you're hung up. So we can't ship goods very well. So coming here, we have an alternative route. We have 4 over to 95 and head north that way. So that's a good thing for us to ship out our truckloads of product, which is heat exchangers for heat pipes and HVAC applications. The other thing is that we do bring in materials coming in from overseas, and they come in from mostly from the European market area. They bring product in by the container loads here, and so we needed a port in the area here, and the port here is really good for us. Used to, we'd have to run our product coming in from Halifax to New York to Norfolk to Savannah, and then we would get it and sit in a week in customs, and finally we would get it. But with Tampa's location, we're able to go around the peninsula down there and come up to a port without all that problems that we had before. And the other thing is that with the ability to have a local where we're located is close to the casino over there, the Seminole Casino, is that we have a lot of folks are able to commute to there fairly quickly and fairly easily. To be quite honest, I haven't figured out the bus route at this point, but I'm working on that. So, because we do want to get because of our situation, we start work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we have a small crew, and the small crew has to all be there. So and they have to be there at 6 o'clock, or if they're late, they become an occurrence. And it's when they get an occurrence, after so many occurrences, then they're written up, and eventually they're let go if the occurrences continue and it gets out of hand. So they had to have reliable transportation. That's a requirement for them to get here, whether it's public transportation or whether it's their own personal car, have to be here. So it's important to be close to some bus route, which is where we were, close to the casino, so that's important. I don't know if anyone uses it, but at this point in time, we're still trying to gather up another option for them because it is important that they get there on time. And we work very closely with all the OSHA standards to make sure all the lifting and the safety and all the requirements are necessary, so that we don't have people lifting heavy equipment, whatever, beyond their means when people aren't there on job site and when they need to be there.
All right.
So those are some things that we look at very closely.
Thanks.
Okay.
And Tom, would you provide us an
Yeah, most of our customers are consumer good companies, and as such, our ship-to locations tend to be population areas. We selected the area that we're in because we're in the middle of a lot of consumers. Between Tampa, Orlando, we can reach a lot of people in the state of Florida from where we're located now. And the current highway system really works well for that. We can get to most places in the southeast relatively inexpensively and compete with folks in the Atlanta, Alabama, South Carolina areas from a freight perspective. And while the distribution network works very well to reach those population centers on trucks that have a couple-hour windows, I think Ken made a good point. It's a little difficult to get access to all the population centers where the people that need to come work your plan are. As we continue to grow, we've got 150 folks or so at our facility. You limit the population centers that you have access to for the personal town that you need to run high-speed manufacturing areas. While the highways are great, we have similar policies, and most manufacturers will, because time is sensitive. We need people to be at work on time. If they're 10 minutes late, or you don't make 1 billion containers that year, folks aren't going to drive more than 25 or 30 minutes if they don't know there's a second way to get there. I think that's been a challenge for us. It really limits how far away we can go to get people to come work at our facility. We would love to take advantage of the port. We have some facilities in other parts of the states that do. We haven't been able to make that work yet, but it has to be part of an integrated system where once you get it to the port, you get it on a truck or a rail and get it to the place that it needs to be. We've been working for years to get a rail spur justified.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, certainly want to give you all the opportunity to ask any questions of these folks. I have a few of my own, but I would defer to you first if I may, if you have any. Mr. Beckner.
Yes, I would be interested to know, and I think Ken, you touched upon it a little bit, that your current employees, do either of you know the percentage of your employees that use public transportation to get to your jobs? And have you heard any comments about the public transportation systems, or why not they use our system?
At least from our perspective, being new here, we have folks from Plant City, Tampa, as well as Temple Terrace. So there's a smattering of people all over. They're not one particular location. And I don't believe that any of them use the bus system. Now, when we first came here, we wanted to make sure there was secondary transportation. But I don't think they have used it, and I have not seen folks coming around to solicit ridership, for instance, whether it's through the little industrial park that we're in. It took me a while to actually find a bus station, to be quite honest. So once I started doing the research on it, I found it, and then kind of figured out the route. But it's not necessarily a direct route for most folks. So I think that they're having a difficult time using that because of that, for where they're living.
I'd say we're pretty close to 0%. There's a bus stop about 3 miles away from the plant, and I don't believe anybody makes that hike.
There's another issue I would like to bring up, if you don't mind, is that we start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and our day is over with at 3. Well, I've been watching my watch, and it seems like it rains at 3 o'clock every day. So I'm not sure they want to go out to where the bus stop is, for instance, and there's no shelter. And they'll be getting wet when they're on their way home. And so I've noticed that some of the bus stops don't have shelters, and that was a concern what I noticed. And that may be a reason why they're not using them as well.
Steve, would you answer the Commissioner's question?
Our plant, no one takes public transportation, and they come from primarily Pinellas County. I'm the lone wolf that lives in Lutz and enjoys that drive very much. I can shave and read and listen to the radio, and hours.
This is a guy to avoid on the highway.
So, yeah, it's tough. I think all of us, what we ought to do is one day take public transportation to where we work and see what it's like. Because I've done that when I've been on the road in Dallas and a couple other cities when light rail was the hot topic. I took the Dallas rail system, and that was a very interesting experience. I could write a book. But these are things that if we talk to the people that we work with and our neighbors and the factory owners, and the HR people probably hear about it first. I'm in sales, so I'm the last guy that hears about it unless a shipment's late. But I know that there are people that would like to, particularly when they work from, so like our plant, first shift starts at 7. If they knew that they could take a bus, it would be a great way for them to save money when gas is now $3.49 a gallon. So it's worth looking into for our people. Or figure out, like in Chicago, McDonald's in Water Tower Place 18 years ago was sending a van out to get kids to come work for their facility. They took the bull by the horns. They didn't wait for somebody else to fix their problem. They did it themselves. Now, we don't employ enough people to do that, but there are some manufacturers that could. It would make sense. Or develop carpooling within their plants.
So one of the alternatives you would be, from a manufacturing perspective, are vans that could be run that either could get people to your plant
Yep.
or to a central public transit point
Right.
to move that. Okay. Mr. Evans?
The second
Although there
question.
is a van,
There is a van,
yeah,
okay?
there is a van opportunity in the county.
Great.
Commissioner?
I was going to say, the second question would be, what would you view as some of the transportation challenges for your business on how you move or ship goods? And if you had a opportunity to make improvements to the transportation structure, what would be the most beneficial to your business?
Ken, go ahead.
Okay, as Tom mentioned earlier, is that we have to move goods and have to be moved rather quickly between here and going north. Most of our goods go north. Some will go to the port to be shipped out overseas, but mostly north. When there's construction and traffic congestion, whatever going on, we have a hard time moving equipment either in or out, especially down 75, because 75 branches off out of Atlanta, pretty much Midwest and West, and 10 as well. So it is imperative that we have an interstate system that can move goods without a lot of delays. And I know after working on 75, and it's quite a bit of miles of construction, but as soon as that is in fully operational, I'm sure that will help out quite a bit. The other thing is that there seems to be a lot of cars that seem to be broken down, more so here. I come from Texas originally, and in Texas there was a mechanical inspection of your vehicles, and I'm not necessarily an advocate for that, but there was that process, and there wasn't very many mechanical breakdowns, and these are blown tires or whatever, and it does slow traffic down, and even bringing the help assistance that you have, I think that's great, but that's also even slows traffic down and slows down and congests traffic to get our goods back and forth, as well as our people back and forth. And there's quite a few, we have tardies after 6 o'clock for their start time associated with congestion and traffic. So those are some things that we've observed and some things that I think we could focus on a project, for instance, that not 16 miles, but maybe 4 miles. Therefore, the congestion is much less, and not so much for that length of time and so many issues associated with weaving in and out of the different traffic lanes. That's my suggestion.
Okay. So traffic congestion, less of that, real advantage to you.
It would be a good, yes, big advantage, because we do move a lot of flatbed trucks. Another issue that with the state of Florida is that we ship a lot of product out with flatbeds, and it's some of our products fairly large, and Florida south of here isn't really a huge manufacturing. Help me out, Steve, but I don't know if it's really heavy manufacturing. There's manufacturing, but not heavy. But with it being not heavy, there's not a lot of flatbeds come this way. So we have a hard time finding flatbeds. And when we do, and with 4 here helps us out, because now you're kind of converging 2 different interstates and we can go from there. But the accessibility to flatbeds certainly would help out our business. And I'm sure it would help out other heavy type of industry businesses in shipping full truckloads out. especially to job sites where you have to pull things out off the top of the truck versus pulling it out the back, because they may not have a fork truck or even a dock.
Tom, you would like to reply to the
Well,
commissioners?
just to expand on it a little bit, our deliveries are pretty time sensitive. We typically have about a 45-minute window to get product offloaded at a customer, and congestion is there, but having an alternate route when the truck driver is sitting in traffic and he knows he's going to be there for 2 hours and he's going to miss his order, he can call all kinds of people, but if there's not an alternate route, the order's not going to get there in time. And we go up and down 95 and 75, and it happens more often than we would like, for sure.
And Steve?
I was going to say, a large number of our customers are just in time. And so they literally will give you either, we're lucky, we get a day, or never late, you can be a day early or the day. And so if something bad happens, everybody's biting their nails and shaking their head because you get a black mark. And you don't want that from the big customer that you're selling your products to, because you want to do more business with them, not less.
So the combination of just-in-time and lean manufacturing really makes timeliness really
Yes.
valuable to y'all.
Yes.
What we've done is to eliminate that, because we're needing material on a just-in-time basis. We actually have to stock inventory because we don't trust the transportation system 100% to get it there to us on time.
So that eats up your free cash.
Exactly.
Where you could expand people, you can't because you got it invested in inventory.
That's right.
Mr. Sharp?
I wanted to follow up on the just-in-time issue, and if we were going to try to grow our manufacturing base here in this region, what would it take to make us more successful? I was looking at Area Develop magazine. It's an online magazine, reviewed 380 MSAs, just came out, and they rank them on their ability to deal with these issues. Tampa ranked 320 out of 380. Orlando is 155.
It was raining that day.
It was raining that day. So, but it talks about results matter, especially when it comes to spending huge amounts of time and money setting up new business locations. That's why it's important to locate the operation in a city or region that knows how to grow its economy and has a track record to prove it. Opening paragraph. So if you're outside of Tampa Bay, and we know how wonderful Tampa Bay is, but if you're outside of Tampa Bay, and then you read that we're 320, that could be a challenge, which is why I think it's so important that we invest now in transportation. But my question to you then is, would it make a difference, even a psychological difference, if our community was to take steps today to improve our transportation network? Would other manufacturers, or would you look at that as a sign, a positive sign, and a reason for expanding operations, or maybe helping to recruit others to come here so we can create these jobs?
I guess I'll start with that. To answer your question, that's what drove Heat Pipe here, is the ability to have two interstate systems here, an alternative route to where we were located. For other manufacturers who are used to two alternate routes, may want an improvement in that regard. Therefore, an investment in transportation would be very interesting to them, more so than what it was to us. We were just glad to have two interstates. So I think it would be beneficial to invest in that, because there will be other folks, specifically ones that have to move a lot of goods north by way of trucking systems, and use those interstate systems to get there.
Thanks, sir.
Steve?
Well, I'm just, being a kind of a conservative lad, how much is it going to cost for this expanded system to alleviate, and how much are we, you and I and you, and everybody else willing to pay for that? Is it $8 billion? What was it, Everett Dirksen, $1 million here, $1 million there? Pretty soon you're talking some real money. That's the challenge. How are we going to pay for it? I don't think anybody in here would say it's a bad idea.
Commissioner Higginbottom?
Yeah, and I think part of it is that all of us need to understand manufacturing. That it's not, dark, dingy, and dirty. And in 2009, when
Could you move your microphone?
and in 2009 is when when Steve and I first met, when I hosted a luncheon with the manufacturers at the family room to get these types of discussions underway. And I was just in Ken's shop week before last, and it struck me that you came here for those reasons, that availability of transportation. And I asked that question about the transit when we were touring the factory. And I don't know if factory is even the right word, but a lot of it is the workforce. And I think that the takeaway I had, Steve, from that luncheon, we've since got a manufacturing task force because it's been a keen priority of mine. Was we've got to get after our workforce, and that was where the concern was, and that's led to this consortium with the educational side.
Right.
And Fran, you mentioned the bus, the vans. We have to make sure that people know, because with where Ken's located, you're kind of tucked off in the corner there, and it's not the easiest place to get to. But if your folks know, and your shift is also maybe would create some challenges with the fixed timetable that we have. I know that the express buses out in East County, people are using them there. They like it, but it wouldn't service you. But maybe a combination with the customized system with the vans would work for your folks. And I want to say it was about 1.5 years when I was at y'all's shop for a tour. But part of it is that we all need to have a better understanding of what the manufacturing does. And it's not a lot of heavy manufacturing. It's the high tech. But part of it is how do we pay for it? But two, with what we have to customize and laser beam in to get the people in and out of Ken's operation. Because it was a bright, clean shop, floors you could eat off of, swarming with engineers and guys that are a lot smarter than I am. And the same there, it's like Axiom, another major manufacturer that makes the circuit boards for Apple, the iPads. They ship them to China, where they put them in the iPads, and then they send them back here because of quality. But we have a lot of the components, and that's what I think is so valuable about this, is to get these perspectives. And Kevin asked good questions as well on how would your people use it, and how do they use it? And there was a revelation, and I didn't think to suggest that day when I was over at your operation. But
Well, we have an expert here in the room. Mr. Rotella from the West Shore Alliance worked for many years with Tivada, and there is not only an active carpool program, but Tivada runs a van program, so where the employees drive and pick each other up. I can't give you the details because Hart doesn't run that, Tivada does, but it is available here in this county.
If I'd like to mention as well, one other thing, is that we don't have a conditioned facility. Our facility is ambient air conditions, and we do have about 200,000 CFM on the roof that pulls the air through, so we do have some comfort. But it gets plenty hot about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and with the humidity levels, it makes it pretty much a difficult work environment. So that's the reason why we start it so early. And matter of fact, I'm advocating starting at 5, but I haven't gotten too many takers yet.
That's people volunteering to come in at 5.
But if you drew a productivity curve, about 1:30, 2 o'clock, it drops like a rock, because people are tired, the heat, they're wore out. And so if we were able to start earlier, the productivity would be better, but that's...
So one lesson for us is, as we think about transportation systems, they may need to work on earlier schedules than the sort of 8 to 5, 9 to 6 sort
the
of schedule.
flexibility to be able to adjust those times and their routes. So very important.
Okay, all right.
I have one question. Ken, a lot of your product comes into the port?
Some of our material comes into the port, yes.
The raw material?
Raw material, yes.
To the port, is that truck or is that rail to your?
It is it's trucked to our facility, yes.
Okay.
Container loads.
Was that it? Were you using the port before?
We were not using the Tampa port. We were using the Jacksonville port. I'm sorry, the Savannah, Georgia port. And that was the way they were shipping it through Halifax and Norfolk and down to Savannah. And so with the Tampa port, they actually come around the peninsula and comes up that way. So it's,
What your overall cost?
it lowers our overall cost. Yes, it does. It dropped at about, from a pound per pound. We buy copper. It comes from Greece. The copper drops about I think about 4 cents a pound because of that. So it makes a difference to us. And each container has around 20,000 pounds of copper in it. Okay.
Sure.
Well, I was just curious about the port as it relates to the manufacturing element of what we do here. I mean, I want to kind of elaborate on that. I know the governor is very committed to the expansion of this port and the other ports around the state, and taking advantage of what's happening in the Panama Canal at some point. It seems to me that, is that not going to drive up more truck activity in our state and in our region?
Well, the port's really important, particularly with the gantry system that came into play a few years ago. It was a great benefit. What we're talking about with, I'm sure everybody knows this, with the widening of the Panama Canal, well, those same vessels that are designed to utilize that, they won't be able to come into the port of Tampa unless we dredge, that's my understanding, dredge the canals in the port. And how will that impact manufacturers? It depends. They will ask you, I mean, they're going to be on the phone to you over there saying, have they fixed the port yet so I can get my new fancy ship in there? And you'll say, no, but I still want to use you. So we'll get the old boats.
Not to interrupt, but my understanding from Mr. Anderson was they were going to offload the larger ships south in the Caribbean, and then from those offload stations, then have more of the ships that we're capable of taking coming into our port. But it's still, ultimately, it means more ships, more trucks, more road activity, which means less space for residents, tourists, and others who might want to get around as well. I'm just curious, because again, if we're driving towards increasing manufacturing in our community, does that mean we use, I'm curious about the rail versus truck, how that works.
Which one's less expensive? Because that's what we're really interested in.
Which one?
If you're full load, full truckload versus a TEU, 20-foot, 40-foot,
Why don't you
rails.
explain what a TU is for me, please?
Oh, the cubic feet, the size of the container.
The car.
Yeah, it's rails, the cheapest, unless
Always.
it's been a while.
It is.
Commissioner Merman?
If I can make just a brief comment, we are really aggressively pursuing export business. And when they hooked up the CSX line at the port, I mean, that has been such a boost to our activity. It's, we've seen a lot more opportunity with the rail going, where they can immediately offload right there at the port without having to go to a truck over to a rail car. They can go right to the rail car. And it has dramatically improved our productivity. And it is, I believe it's less expensive.
We ship a lot of our product overseas. About 20 to 25% goes international. Most of it to Malaysia and China. And believe it or not, we actually ship it to LA from here by truck.
LA?
LA. And it's shipped out of there versus off of a ship here in the Tampa port. And the reason is that the delay is going through the Panama Canal with the current situation there. It slows that for it to be delivered, because time is money getting it there, and on time delivery. So we can actually ship it to LA and get it across to that location in Malaysia quicker than going through the port here.
Wow.
Would that change if the situation changed in the Panama Canal? Would it be cheaper for you to go that route?
As long as there was the crowding of that that canal isn't existing anymore, because a lot of times they're anchored out in both sides waiting to get through the canal. So that's a delay. So to answer your question is if we could get through there quicker and the cost is better, then certainly we'd be going through the Tampa port. I mean, I'm a little concerned about offloading. There's a cost to offload and then bringing it back in here because that's another handling. So I'm not sure how much that's going to cost.
Commissioner Sharp?
You addressed earlier the issue of your employees and the ability to get them to work and to get them to work early. I think part of our challenge with the bus service, and we've set record numbers each month when we look at Hart's ridership, it's up significantly over the year before, but we're still dealing with approximately 200 buses. Compares to Denver, where their operating system has over 1,000 buses. And I'm not talking about like a Chicago or New York, let's just, again, comparable. So they've got more buses with which to go direct, greater frequency. I know that Mr. Hale is getting ready to present his TPD, or TDP, which has the potential of doubling our bus fleet. If we were to have more buses, would that make a demonstrable difference to you and to your employees? Do you think that, and we were to outreach to let you know about the service, where our stops are, perhaps with more revenue, the ability to have coverage so you're not standing in the rain? Do you think that would make a difference to your employees?
I believe it would. And I'm come from Gainesville previously, and they had a system there you can use on your smartphone to know where your bus is. And that was pretty slick. So something like that with the technology, along with additional buses and the times associated with the commissioner mentioning about how we can get there on a regular basis on earlier schedules, I think that would actually increase our ridership.
I have been giving Mr. Hale grief about phone apps, everyone grief, and to his great credit, they have worked in a partnership with a group of students, have an app that's going to be released when, Mr. Hale?
Monday.
What's it called?
One bus away.
One bus away, so you'll be able to follow our bus with almost the frequency like my son, who can follow every plane in the air. And there's thousands of them. We can now actually track a couple hundred buses, which I'm thrilled about. But thank you, Mr. Hale, but that will be available.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Tom, you'd like to reply?
Yeah, I think it would have an impact for a site like ours, but I don't believe you're going to reach 100% of the population. Maybe 10, 15% of the folks, if it was available, would use busing as an alternative.
I would ask our elected representatives, when you study a problem like this, what city has the best transportation system for its city, its citizens? Who comes up number one?
That's I'm gonna add a caveat to that, because we all say New York, but I mean, that's, geographically spread out like we are.
That's New York too, so. I mean, comparable sized city, community.
I mean, I'd spend a lot of my time looking at best systems, and you've got the comparable cities and the non-comparable. But what I will tell you is there's a direct correlation between those cities and regions that have a superb bus system and those that are not ranking 320 out of 380 MSA, but top 10, top 20 MSA. And those are your Raleighs, your Salt Lake Cities, your Phoenix, Valley Metro, Dallas DART. You go across from the East Coast to the West Coast, you see the number of buses that they have in their fleet. And Mr. Hale's challenges, and I oftentimes will be challenged, our ability to provide a quality service, but we're still dealing with 1,000 square miles, 200 buses. The only operating area which is larger is LA County, and they got a lot more buses.
Yeah.
So when you look at where the regions are which are producing the best with regard to job creation and economic development, it's those areas which have invested in their transit system and in their buses. And the top 10, obviously the New Yorks, the DCs, the, Honolulu is,
Okay. As a manufacturer, we talk about best practice.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's the key for us, because with this great initiative you've got with the many people sitting around the table, it's easy for manufacturers to say we need this, 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 and this. Then we always go in a black room and figure out what's it gonna cost us, and we say, not that, not that, not that. True?
Absolutely true.
We do it in the front office.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
They're a more
We're-
transparent organization than
We're
you.
different.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
No back office to go in. If I had an air-conditioned office, I'd go into it.
Start at 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, as Ken, you had talked about employees in Gainesville, and I was going to ask about your culture in your other locations that you've had, or if you transferred here from another region or city. Were there a larger percentage of your employees there using public transportation? So the question I'm asking about is it a culture inside your organizations that your employees would use public transportation if they had a robust system that they could use?
There is a cultural element there. I came from Dallas, so the DART system there was heavily used. It was a train that we used in Dallas, as well as a bus system, and folks use it quite regularly. And also before that, I came from Atlanta area at the MARTA system there as well. They use that as well too. So I think if with an outreach program that we would make it into the culture of the organization, because we're an energy recovery company. So we would promote that, and that's one of our things. So we would be looking at ways of cutting costs, whether it's shutting the lights off in the bathrooms or use public transportation. So we would be promoting it.
Yeah, I transferred down from our Atlanta facility, and the MARTA system was great where we were. We were on the outside of the 285 loop, but probably 25–30% of our employees came via train or bus.
I think it would be really fascinating to work with you all here for Hart to go into your facility and to survey your employees. If we showed them what the transportation options were now, and laid everything out, communicated that with them, I would be interested in their feedback on would or would they not use the system as it exists now, and what would they need in order for them to utilize our system. I would be fascinated, wondering if Hart would maybe look at that and do a survey like that now that you're at the table, and just kind of figure that out where we're at now with you all.
Sure. You're more than welcome.
Just come early in the day because it gets tight.
Be there at 5 and you'll be a winner.
And to answer around Steve's point, there is some interesting complex issues that we have here. A lot of it has to do, as Commissioner Sharp mentioned, the size of our county, but also how we have planned and the densities of where our populations have made transportation a little bit more of a challenging thing to efficiently plan here.
Right.
And so those are all the things that go into the mix when trying to figure out this puzzle.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank our manufacturing guests, and let's you to vacate your seats so I can bring up our next guest. So our site relocation folks can come up. Keisha?
Bring your wife out.
Here.
Okay.
Your souvenir from
I
there.
want to check with them.
I will.
Ken, take care. I didn't notice the heat when I was in.
Come out there now.
Glad you.
I'll do that. Good to see you.
Deb, she's sitting right there.
See you on the agenda.
Okay.
Just don't tell me stories about the old days. I got as many as that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, our second round is to hear from folks who are engaged in the business of business relocation and sites, and to hear how they think about transportation. I'd like to do the same thing. I'd like to give you the elevator speech introduction, if you would, and then come around and I'll ask you to talk for a minute or so about how transportation, that variable in terms of all the things you look at, sort of where it moves up, where it moves down, how you think about that. If we give introductions, Keisha first, please.
Okay.
And we'd like to thank Keisha. She flew in from Tallahassee to join us today. So
I actually got the opportunity to drive down
okay.
this morning, so
You
I
drove.
got to, yes, I got to experience some of the things that we'll be talking about today. Well, my name is Keisha Rice. I am president of Access Strategies. My former position before starting this company was as deputy director of the Office of Tourism, Trade, and Economic Development. So that kind of affords me a little bit different perspective when looking at companies that are trying to relocate for Florida. We do specialize in foreign businesses, and we do specialize in relocations. So we also do expansions. So I'll certainly be able to talk to that if you have any questions about that. But the perspective that I generally bring to companies is one from two specific areas. One is to build a but-for scenario to be able to make maximum usage of the state's incentives, incentives that can be used locally as well. And naturally, those incentives, as they should be, can't be accessed unless there's a but-for case made for the company to use them in their relocation or expansion. And I also bring the perspective of the entity that is actually looking at what the local communities have gotten together and decided that what they want from themselves, 20, 10 years down the road from companies, what they want to be able to provide really as a service to their citizenry. So we certainly look at the local buy-in, how easy that is to do, how many levels of stakeholder involvement have to be accessed in order to gain funds or incentives or local support, and how easy it is to get to or meet the needs of the legislature once those things have been met on a local level. So that's kind of the perspective that we use, and yeah.
CJ?
Hi, my name is CJ Evans with Merit Advisors. I've been with several firms, Ernst & Young, Ryan, and now Merit. I've been doing economic development consulting, site selection consulting for a little over 15 years. Similar to Keisha, we represent companies that, are looking to expand, relocate their businesses. We pretty much work in conjunction, with the commercial real estate brokers, kind of side by side. Obviously, they have a heavier real estate focus. We're going to have a more financial focus, probably reporting to a little bit different people in the organization. CFOs want to know what we have to say. The VPs of real estate, ops guys want to know what the real estate guys are saying. But from a teamed approach, we're more tasked again with what's the economics of the projects look like. So looking at return on investments, comparative analysis, just hey, this is what we want to do, but can we even afford to do it? And again, you'll have your site criteria, transportation, infrastructure. I would argue that public infrastructure tends to be the broad piece. Now, again, we'll get into more detail, but as we get into various, sectors, manufacturing, headquarters, obviously that will differ in terms of how broadly it's defined, how specific it's defined, and how important it is.
Okay. Jimmy?
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Jim Garvey. I'm with a company called Cassidy Turley. Still getting used to saying that. We just changed the name of our company from CLW a couple months ago. Well, we're commercial real estate brokers, and I've been working down here since 1985. I moved down here from Boston, which is a city that relies on mass transit to move the people back and forth. And it's a funny story. When I lived in Boston, I didn't own a car. That was kind of a rare thing. You lived in the city, you took the T, and that's how you got around. I came to Tampa, and the question I had was, what traffic? This is not a big issue here. So I've seen from '85 to now, how traffic has gone up and down, but it really hasn't been a major negative influence from the perspective that I see. And predominantly what I do is represent businesses for their office space, whether it's a new business coming to town and deciding whether they want to come to Tampa or go to Nashville or what have you, or existing companies, that have a lease that expires and they have to determine whether they're going to stay in West Shore or move to Northeast Tampa. And one of the big things we'll do is put an employment, demographic map together showing where their existing employee base is. And every time you do that, it pretty much restricts the company to staying right in the same location that there is. You don't see much movement out of submarkets. Like a tenant in West Shore rarely will go to Northeast Tampa because there'll be a major loss of employment from Pinellas County. It does happen every now and again. USAA did it. They moved 650,000 square feet from West Shore up to Northeast Tampa. MetLife, moved from West Shore proper up to Bruce B. Down. So not to say it doesn't happen, but it does happen. So my perspective really is more from the employment standpoint, and mass transit has not been driving force for us. Bus lines and that sort of thing in the West Shore area. I think that there's the ability for people to do that as you get to the periphery markets. We've got a project up in Temple Terrace in Telecenter, which is in Telecom Park, and that has been a recurring question. When we talk to tenants that were interested in, that's a 200,000 square foot facility designed for big back office users. And every question, every proposal we would get would be, what's your public transportation system like? And with the new Heartline that's going out there, that's been a good solution for us. I can't tell you what kind of usage it's getting, but it's good to have that in place now. I think over time, just like the Veterans Expressway. I don't know if you all remember when that was built in 1992. Mm-hmm. Nobody was using it because nobody wanted to pay 50 cents or 75 cents. Now we're having to widen it and make it bigger, and I saw some projections where the reverse commute is going to be a much bigger thing as we see more growth going up in Pasco County. A big thing that we've seen when we study kind of the growth patterns is, will the office market move, to the mountain? When everybody was moving out to New Tampa, and they were all coming down here from New York and Boston, and they were saying, I take a train an hour and a half. This is no big deal. Well, after a while, you acclimate to the city you're in, and you don't want to drive more than 25 minutes. So we went from, many of you can remember, zero office market out there. It was just, cows, pasture land, that sort of thing, to over 4 million square feet of office space got built out over a course of 10 years as, companies went to that demographic to take advantage of that employment. Verizon moved out there and that sort of thing. So that's the perspective I bring to it. And transportation is something that we constantly look at from a value standpoint as well as ability to attract labor.
Okay, thanks. One of the things I learned from y'all is that in Tampa, at least, a 25-minute commute is kind of starts to be an acceptable boundary. Once you start going past that, it becomes a problem. So is it, is that a standard that this community should shoot for in its transportation system to maintain that 25, 30-minute commute? Does that give it a competitive advantage, or is it just going to need to get used to a Washington, New York time commute? CJ, your thoughts?
I mean, again, I think it depends.
Okay, it depends on what?
I think it depends on the type
Where
of
the
company
company's
it is.
coming from and who they are.
I think there's a direct correlation between how far you're willing to drive, probably, and how much money you make. If it's a really good paying job, somebody probably would drive from Sarasota to Tampa. Sure. Again, I think it's just going to be across the continuum.
All right. Okay. Excuse me, say, Ms. Devon and Commissioner Becker.
Yeah, I come from the Los Angeles area, and 25 minutes was a baseline, but it was 25 minutes to get from your home to the expressway. No, I'm serious.
I believe you.
And that's how new communities were built all over the San Fernando Valley, et cetera.
Okay.
If you could get from your suburban house to the expressway in 25 minutes, they didn't really count then what time it took on the expressway. So 25 minutes in different communities can
different things.
Be very elastic. That's right.
But I think similar to what you said, like you acclimate to it. So I mean, if I look at myself, I started out working in business and I lived off Bayshore. I had a longer drive. It took me longer to go up the Regions Bank building, spiral than it did to get from my house to the Regions Bank building. Okay. Then I moved to Atlanta and I lived in the perimeter, and so it took me 30 minutes. I thought that was really long, but after a couple of years, I got used to 30 minutes wasn't that bad. Then I moved back here to Palm Harbor, and I worked downtown, and I had a 45-minute drive. And I was like, geez, how could I have a longer drive, going from Atlanta to here? And now I work in West Shore, and I have a 30-minute drive, and I think it's great. So, again, I think a lot of it's relative and heavily dependent upon the type of industry it is.
Okay.
All
right. Okay. Commissioner Becker.
I'm going to ask you a very simple but yet seems to be a very complex question. I was glad to see you all are going to be here. I have asked this question of everybody that I could come in contact, especially in our economic development department, since I got elected in 2008. And nobody's been able to answer this question. So let me ask you all this question. Can you tell me the top 5 reasons why people would come to Tampa Bay, relocate their business, and more importantly, the 5 top reasons why they decided would not come here? I'm looking for a reoccurring reasons of why people come here and don't come here, because I think this is absolutely important that we understand as government leaders that if there are things that we need to fix of why people don't come here, we need to fix those. And in particular, is transportation one of those reasons cited why people don't come here?
Okay. Well, so let's start with that very last question, and we'll flip it and go to the why they do come here. And let me go around each of our locations and give us one reason or one response, and I'll keep going around until we've exhausted them. But Keisha, with you.
I would definitely say one of the top selling points of this region is certainly the port.
We'll start with why people come here. Then.
Yes.
Okay, we'll start with why. Why do businesses come here?
Like I said, the port, the infrastructure. I mean, when a company's looking at whether or not they can come here and not only get their goods and services, generally, as the last panel was saying, generally north from here, they're certainly looking at whether or not there's not only the infrastructure present, but whether or not there are future plans to address any problems. If you don't have either a concerted effort from all of the local entities so that the layers of voting for particular issues, because all of this naturally is going to be done through the citizenry. If you don't have a concerted effort to address any of those issues, either to and from the port, if we're talking about the port, to and from the port, whether or not they need a road spur, a rail spur, whether or not they need an overpass, whether or not they need to access the Economic Development Transportation Fund, the trust fund that's available. You know, they're looking at how many people, entities do I have to talk to in order to get this particular issue dealt with? So if it's a port issue, do we need people, the Port Authority voting? Do we need all of the local entities? Having a concerted effort like today is a rarity. So that's a big deal to a company.
Okay. So the fact that you have this asset and you have a plan to address any problems or improve that asset.
Absolutely.
And how
streamlined that process
is to do
Absolutely.
that. Okay. Jimmy, why do people come?
Weather.
Okay.
I mean, it's a big reason. Don't discount it. It's you see a big spike right after the wintertime, especially if it's been a nasty wintertime. It's the reason I came down here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Secondly, barriers to entry in terms of finding a good job, being able to penetrate the marketplace with what you do in terms of meeting people. You come from staid communities, older places where it's very entrenched as to how business is done. That's not the case down here. You're able to pick up the phone and I can call Bob and get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very big part of it. It's a streamlined process in terms of permitting. I mean, you're going to hear developers grumble about DRIs and SwiftMud and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's really not that bad. The process of getting it done.
Okay.
And again, a community that you can reach out to the appropriate people.
So weather, you can get access to people. It's open, and the process is somewhat streamlined. CJ.
I'll answer your question directly.
Good.
Workforce, financial climate, so taxes, whatnot, just can you do business? What Governor Scott talks about, what Governor Perry talks about, how you want a good state to do business in, you want a good locality to do business in. Fifth one, and this is where the it depends comes in, depends on what industry you're in, and then transportation can become important. I mean, I group them into 3. So if it's warehouse distribution, and we heard from and manufacturing, we heard a lot of manufacturers, well, yeah, it's going to be important. It could be important from a port standpoint, from a rail standpoint, from an interstate standpoint. And as you saw, it was less important from getting people to work standpoint. So you got the cultural thing of, hey, in Florida, people like cars. In Boston, you didn't have to like cars. I have friends that live in New York, they don't own cars. If you look then at lower end shared services, contact centers, call centers, the bus system becomes really, really important. And whoever mentioned before, if you look at who's doing really good from an MSA standpoint, again, they've got really, really good bus systems because it's cost effective and it gets people where they need to go. And then last, I would say your higher end shared services, financial services, headquarters. Again, if we're on a site tour and we happen to be coming through the I-475, 275 Apex, yeah, I'm going to get the question, is it always like this? But probably would they not do a project here just because there's a little bit of traffic congestion at 5 o'clock? No.
Okay, so let's go to the other side of the question. Why don't people come?
And again, I'm looking for reoccurring themes. I know everybody might be different, but you all deal with relocation. So I'm wondering if there's a reoccurring reasons that you hear over and over again why people don't come here.
Weather is definitely reoccurring. I mean, there are going to be companies, I know in particular, for example, I had a conversation with some folks from Virgin Galactic, and we were looking at which of this was years and years and years ago, and we were looking at whether or not they were going to have particular portions of their business in Florida or portions of their business in New Mexico. And there were folks on some of their key decision makers said, we're just not going to be in Florida, period, because we don't like the 3 o'clock, they call it the Florida rainy season. We just don't like that. We don't like the hurricanes. We don't like tropical storms. We just don't like having that uncertainty with the weather. So there are going to be people that just say yes or no, just straight up and down very, very quickly.
So weather
So we got some people who come for the weather and some not.
Absolutely.
All right.
But it's
Okay.
recurring.
All right. CJ, recurring?
I don't get recurring, this isn't why we're going to come. I mean, again, generally, the nice thing with me is we rarely start with the list.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that through the commercial real estate broker and the company, we've whittled it down to less than 5. And so probably most of the negatives have been expressed, and we're dealing with a list that, probably will work, at least from a functional standpoint, and we got to, figure out if it does better. But
So the nature of your business is the folks who don't want Florida for weather are already off.
they're already off, for the most part. But I just think about it. I don't get any big negatives. I don't have anyone say, hey, we wouldn't do this in Florida because.
Okay. Let's ask Jim, and then we'll go to another.
And I'm thinking also, just to narrow it down, in Tampa in particular, since that's where we're talking
Jim,
about.
you have a response?
Yeah, the affordable workforce is something that we're pretty strong with here. And, it used to be that there were some good incentives doled out to companies that took advantage of that. And it seems like now the incentive base is going after much higher paying jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so now if you're a low paying, type of user, they're finding it hard to find big blocks of cheap space, and they're also finding it hard to get incentives, for that, say less than $40,000 a year annual job. It seems like Florida's going, not what we're interested in. You bring us to $70,000 and we'll build you new roads, we'll give you all kind of incentives and, waive impact fees and that sort of thing. And you're seeing those companies go to periphery markets that, in the past were used as whipping posts. Now they're getting them. So I would say that'd be the biggest thing. But again, if there's a general sentiment by Tampa, Florida, that those aren't the jobs we're looking for, then, you're going to be prepared to let them go and chase the higher ones. I mean, we've got a good, she was just asking about, education. Florida, Tampa in particular is perceived as a good location for qualified workforce. We've gotten a lot of IT company growth happening in this area. I don't know why, if that's just because IT people like warm weather or just what it is, but there seems to be a lot of growth happening in that industry. And you can point it to USF being a big facility that turns out a lot of qualified tech employment. So to me, it would be lower paying jobs.
Mr. Higginbotham and Commissioner Sharp.
In the IT growth, there was a deliberate effort to go after that market, and that's one of the reasons you see that is that in the early days of the EDC, that was a discussion. And so why is it there? Because we were targeting that. That's why coming back to manufacturing, seeing that grow and become vibrant and go through an image change. So that's one of the reasons on IT.
Commissioner Sharp.
You're successful.
Mr. Garvey, I'm interested in, with regard to the IT, I mean, one of the things we are trying to do is to shift our focus to the higher wage jobs, not because we don't see that there's a value in medium and lower wage jobs. Obviously there is, but there's a correlation for, I mean, the numerical one high wage job creating 3 to 4 of other jobs. If you focus on the high wage jobs, you get the other jobs. What are the drivers that, though, attract the workforce and the companies that are here specifically for those higher wage IT jobs, and does transportation factor in?
I'll start with the last part. Transportation does not seem to be a big factor, other than downtown. As you look at the places where those larger users can go, and you look at downtown, it's paid parking. It's pain in the neck parking for the most part. I drive a truck, so for me, I'm 6 blocks away, and so that will kind of limit downtown from attracting a lot of that type of use. But when you get out to the suburbs, proximity to USF is a good thing. We were just involved with a couple of life sciences groups that decided to come here, and it was the quality of workforce that they looked at, and this was mostly new jobs, not people relocating, and they were very, very high on what they saw. And as far as other companies relocating, picking up, and moving here, you'll see a very high percentage of those people, if they're in New Jersey or Connecticut or whatever, they're moving down to Tampa, that will take the offer and move down to Tampa. They'll relocate. I think when he moved down here from Massachusetts, I think a high number of the people that were in that Boston office came down here. So, I think the weather's a good thing to me. I mean, it's not a hard sell, and it's affordable living compared to those higher places.
Chairman Hagan?
Thanks, sir. The question I have is there any way to quantify or be able to estimate the percentage of decisions that are based, at least in part, to incentives?
Any of the three of you care to respond? CJ?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the hard part is like for me, I mean, I can only speak to the projects that I work on. It's very important. I mean, again, labor is always going to be the most important, because if you don't have the workforce, then everything else doesn't matter. But then, after you've balanced out a couple of sites and they all work for you, at the end of the day, financials are going to take over. And so, it's not just incentives. It's the hardest thing I have with my clients, to get them to realize you can't look at the gross, you got to look at the net. Yeah. You can't just look at, well, what am I getting for a property tax rebate? You got to first ask yourself, what are you paying in property taxes? Right. And then do the net. But, you got to compare them. But yeah, incentives are very, very important. And probably more important in that, and this is what I preach to other economic development professionals, is I know it's nice, to have policies and to try to have baselines, but I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never had 2 projects that are the same. And so to think that the same incentives are going to work for every project is ludicrous. And I'm not saying you got to start with a blank piece of paper, but companies start to hear and know what jurisdictions will do deals. I mean, if you look at what, was done with Bass Pro Shops, I mean, that's a perfect example of how a project should be approached. I mean, that's a oddball type project, that you couldn't really do anything that was normal. It's not what I would call normal economic development, but let's be honest, man, they're going to generate a ton of sales tax. And so you want them there. It's like a mini amusement attraction, so you're going to have to come up with something that's completely different than what everyone's used to doing, and that's, hey, we do a QTI.
Yeah.
I can tell you the jurisdictions that most of my projects end in, some of them we don't even do a QTI. And if that's all that was going to be done, it wouldn't get done there.
And
Mr. Chairman?
That's music to my ears, CJ. As the commissioner that championed that Bass Pro deal, I appreciate those comments. That's how weird it was. And I want to say on the record, I don't believe we've ever met, right? By no means was that a setup.
I did see you sit the paper over to him.
That was the bill.
But I don't think we can underscore that enough. And I believe James referenced it, but we can no longer just rely on our weather and favorable tax climate. We've lost deals to the Georgias, Alabamas, Mississippis. Before, we never had to compete with these states. Now we are. And unfortunately, there's an element out there that view it as corporate welfare, and that's a shame. But there's a reason why the state of Texas has led the nation in job creation. They offer the most incentives. That's not a coincidence. And we have to, I think the board the Hillsborough County has been very good over the last several years of trying to diversify our incentives above and beyond the standard QTI that you referenced. And that's going to be something I think that we're going to continue to be focused on moving forward, is to come up with creative ways to offer incentives, but at the same time have the appropriate safeguards in place with clawback provisions, so forth, so that will protect the taxpayers. But I'm pleased to hear you say that because it's definitely an important aspect of the.
And I'll make a comment that'll help you with that. Again, I didn't mention in the beginning, but I mean, I represent companies. I've got more clients outside the state of Florida than inside the state of Florida. Fortunately, if you combine Texas and Florida, it's probably 80% of my projects. That ought to tell you something. Because Florida and Texas are two of the best incentive states. You get the third, I don't know, you could throw Virginia in there. If it's industrial, North Carolina, South Carolina, those all start to play, Louisiana. But the one thing that's been the most impressive over the last 3 or 4 years is the safeguarding of the money with the incentive programs. I mean, I would argue that Florida's is way safer than 80% of the states that I see. It's safer than Texas. I mean, Texas gives most of that money when it's coming from similar to the closing fund here. It's all up front for the most part. I mean, if it's a big number, they might bust it into two amounts. Florida used to be that way. They don't do that anymore. I mean, you got to hit certain thresholds now before you get any of the money, and then if you don't meet what you said you're going to do, you got to pay it back.
Yeah, your deliverables over the time frame. Yeah.
Commissioner Sharp?
Trends. I'm curious about work. I think you're right. You said workforce. And I mean, I have read that the younger workforce less interested in driving. There's data which demonstrates that there are fewer. Car ownership, the cost, fuel, time. They want to be working while they're getting to work rather than sitting there with their hands on the steering wheel. So if trending out, since anything that we do is going to take 10 to 15 years anyway, and we're dealing with a different workforce which seems to be much more mobile, back to the value of us making the investment. The last speaker, Steve, when he was sitting to my right, said, yeah, these are important things, but do you want to make the investment? There's a cost. So I guess my question is, would Florida position itself well to attract the workforce here, retain it here, if we make the investment in transportation and in transit?
Let me ask Keisha to respond to that.
Easy answer, yes.
We're done.
That's the easy answer.
I know that all of us are looking at economic development, whether you're the county, the city, or whoever we are, we're looking at it. I mean, our city manager, Greg Horadell, he's repositioned himself where he spent a lot more of his time in economic development. And it seems like we judge ourselves and our successes based on how many companies we have relocate to our areas. But sometimes I think that we need to refocus that effort into, not refocus, but we need to add to that effort into helping the companies that's already here just expand. And giving them that same incentive to expand as we would a company coming in from elsewhere. And I know we found several times as we were doing outreach out to our current manufacturers that we found out, wait a second, they're looking at building a new plant in Orlando. Well, why aren't you looking at building one here? You know, we didn't even know about it. And so it's just simply by getting out to our current customer, because our current customers are our, you know, companies doing business in an area, we're finding expansion opportunities because they're expanding their businesses and we don't even have our hat in the ring. So I guess the question to you, what could we do? Is it the same thing we try to do to get a company to relocate? It's hard to do something for a company that's already here. I understand that. But what should we do in trying to win the business from the expand in our community versus expanding elsewhere?
Okay. You know? I go to Jim, CJ, and then Commissioner Bagner has a question.
It's not hard to give incentives to companies that are already here. You force them to go through sort of a game to say that we're going to move, and then okay, you're going to move. Well, okay, now we'll treat you like your newfound business, and that's a dangerous game because all of a sudden Texas will put something on the table that'll catch their eyes, and they had no intention of moving. All of a sudden they're going, wow, and then it just costs you a lot more money to keep that tenant there. So I think that there's got to be a way that you, without having to go through this negotiation process and this, this treated like it's going to be a new job thing, to recognize, this has been a great, company that's provided jobs and paid tax base and all that to help them grow. And I don't have the answer for that, but
CJ?
Right on spot there.
No, look, it is way easier to grow the existing companies than it is to go fishing for big new ones. And the key is communication. If you're not talking to the companies here and knowing what their problems are, or what they need, well then, again, it's hard to make them grow here. I'll give you an example. I was doing work for another community, and again, they were talking to one of their companies and found out that he did an expansion outside the state, and they were like, "Well, why did you do that?" And they're like, "Oh, we couldn't get 20 CNC guys." Well, they never came to anybody and asked that, well, could someone train them for us? Could they do this and that? Well, that was because nobody, had been talking to them. Right. So, I mean, the biggest one is sit on those people and find out I'm not saying you're going to know their business inside and out. I'm not going to say you can meet with every business, but I'd spend a lot of time, on existing industry. And then the easiest answer to the I'm not saying retain jobs, just existing industry that's expanding is again, you can't pick winners and losers. And unfortunately, that's what the but-for system does, and it's bad. Nobody would run a business that way. I don't know why you'd run an incentive that way. The simple way to do it is you put together a return on investment model. And if it meets your return on investment and it's a good investment, well, then you incentivize those jobs. If it doesn't, you move on. But, the state has moved to a much stronger model that way. I know lots of local jurisdictions, some in the state of Florida, that have moved to that model. And the good thing about that is, especially for, elected officials, is you can defend that. If it's a good investment, again, nobody's going to complain about your Bass Pro Shop deal. I mean, that's a great investment. Again, look at all of them that way, and then figure out what you need to do from an incentive standpoint, if anything.
Commissioner Becker.
Yeah, and just back on the incentives thing, because that was on my mind as well. Companies obviously don't look at, they wouldn't target one area and say, I'm going to go there because they offer the best sales incentives or the best incentives, do they? The financial incentives? In other words, they're not going to go and they're going to say, I'm going to relocate my business to Tampa because we can get the best financial incentives from the government.
No, I mean, they're not. Again, you got to start with what's my business,
right?
Where does my business work? What's the labor like there? And then when you get down to, again, you've got 3 or 4 things that all work, now what does it look like from a financial standpoint? How do those incentives play into that? And look, I've got projects where, the community that put the best incentives package on the table didn't win the project. I mean, again, there's still a weighting factor of, all right, well, it's, they're giving me a little bit more money, but I mean, I like that workforce a little better, or I like this better, or I like the fact that there's a port there better. So, I haven't run into too many build it backwards.
Right.
I have had clients ask me, where can I get the most incentives? And again, I try to turn them around. I don't think we're going about this the right way.
Yeah.
So you would put, how much would you weigh incentives on a decision that a business makes when they decide they're going to locate to?
It's high, and as you go through the site selection process, it gets higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
But the first filter is workforce. And if you don't have the
you're not
workforce,
going to get you're not going to get on the list by having great incentives. So I mean, you could be a community that whatever. Say you're one of these small communities in Texas that has lots of natural gas under it and has money coming out, its ears. You could say, hey, everybody that comes here, I'll give you $1 million, and nobody's going to show up if you don't have anything.
Right, and I want to be sure that we narrow it down to the level that we're talking about. We're talking about, as Mr. Evans said earlier, we're looking at maybe the final 5 or the final 3, and at that point, these are all places where a project could work. So we've talked about weather, we've talked about all these other things. These things have fallen out. And so now when you get to that final 3, it's really just you as a city are having pros or cons that are just basically eliminating you. There's nothing's going to make your case. You're only you're basically taking away from your case at that point. So once you get to maybe the final 3 to 5, it's who's had the least amount of minuses at that point. And those minuses could be some very intangible things because, like you said, it's very, there are about 50% of the times where the community giving the most money is not going to necessarily get the project. So those are going to be based on some very final intangibles that company has. I mean, very fine points at this level that we're talking about.
And you probably dealt with companies that were planning on locating to a community anyways, and obviously they want to just try to get the financial incentive to move there, and that's all the more reason for them.
Hopefully they wouldn't say that.
I mean, I'm sure that's happened.
But yes.
Those are the ones you have to protect you all against.
Right.
I mean, like the Bass Pros that were going to come here anyways, and that was the. I mean, and we just gave out, that
All
type
the
of
Bass
incentives for them that were going to come here. I mean,
Let's just stay silent.
Wiregrass would have opened their arms to them, not Hillsborough County.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank our relocation folks. We appreciate you coming and sharing
Thank you
with
for
us.
having
Great
me.
interaction.
I have one last thing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Should we create a model to where, because, I had a company in downtown, and it's kind of funny you said that. When I was looking at relocating it, I was told by, individuals, well, you need to threaten Tampa to say that you're going to move your company. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm not going to play that game. But I was told to do that,
Mm-hmm.
But we moved the company and added hundreds of jobs and so forth. But I've always thought, shouldn't there be some type of model in place to where if you add this many jobs and these pay ranges or whatever, okay, here's the incentives to do so? Shouldn't that just be like an automatic incentive out there to our current base?
I think CJ's on the right
there?
point, though. I think
Right.
there's a way to monetize that from an economic return.
But that's not just a reload, that's an existing base, though, right?
An existing that grows.
Right.
Not just to keep you here, because then they're probably playing a game. But if the company's gonna grow and you tie the incentives to actual growth. I like that model because you don't just give somebody something for nothing and they don't do anything. They do that growth and they get benefits for it. You shouldn't penalize them for staying and continue to do business in your community.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Cost of doing business, you talked about that being important with regard to a company deciding to come here. And perhaps even the cost to the employee. Texas Transportation Institute consistently ranks Tampa Bay as one of the highest cost for their workforce when you combine their transportation cost and their housing costs, in particular transportation. It's a great study, and as far as being illuminating. So if we are going to, I'm going back to transportation as an incentive. We talk about the incentives that would bring you here. There's the incentive to the company, but there's a cost to the employee. If I'm spending less, or I have the accessible transit or transportation to get me to work, and I can spend less, is that going to help drive business to our community?
Okay, quick yes, no, or maybe. Yes,
Yeah, no,
no.
I'm glad you asked the question, because this is a transportation forum.
Yes, sir.
Kind of got off on incentives, but yes, I do, and I don't think it's mass transit, especially on this coast. I don't think you have the densities for it to work. But from a value standpoint of property and from a...
Mark didn't want you to say.
I will take it.
All right.
No,
He asked the question, he gets the answer.
I want all answers.
I saw his whole bubble burst.
You've had...
I have an answer, but we'll do it
results
later.
When you look at the road improvements that have been done, and I mean, Rocky Point, that area, when it was a 2-lane road,
Oh, yeah.
and they were gonna widen it, market values dropped by 10–15% because of perception that it was gonna be a horrible, horrible process. It wasn't. The maintenance and traffic was fantastic during the building out of it, and those values have come back and gone up probably 10–20% since that time. So I think the road systems that we keep improving and putting money and investing in those, that's working, and that's something that you can do without major,
Okay, all right. CJ, your quick response on that? And then Keisha, your
Yes,
quick response.
and keep building and improving roads.
Okay.
And ditto.
Ditto, okay. Thank y'all very much for your perspective. Different what we've heard.
That's a big part of it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to move, another part of the big planning process we have going on here is the Planning Commission and the future growth and development scenarios. That's about to kick off in its public way, and Melissa is going to give you a briefing on that. So.
Wonderful. Thank you all for having me. Melissa Zornita,
Here's
the
your
Assistant
traffic
Executive
report
Director of the Planning Commission. That's okay. Just want to give you a preview and some information about our Imagine 2040 outreach efforts. And we'll start off with a brief 3-minute video, and then I've just got a couple of slides to show you. So with that, we'll start it. Thanks.
For the year 2040, throughout Hillsborough County, we're seeing major delays. How long do you currently spend in traffic? Multiply that by 4 or even 5 times. That's what our region can look forward to, unless we plan for future growth right now.
There are lots of reasons why about 500,000 more people will live and work here by 2040. We're a county filled with great educational opportunities and neighborhood choices, from rural to urban living and everything in between. There's something for everyone.
With an average temperature of 83 degrees, our fantastic weather lets us enjoy our region full of natural resources and some of the most beautiful beaches in the world year-round.
We've got it all. A wide variety of restaurants and shopping, arts, entertainment, parks and recreation, all wrapped around a rich cultural history. I mean, we're a proud and diverse region, a region that's home to champions and championships, where winning teams keep their eye on the prize and create a strong game plan and stick to their vision. Now it's our turn to team up, keep our home field advantage, and imagine 2040 to create a winning vision for Hillsborough County.
The vision you help develop now will guide the plans that are the roadmap to the future. The 2040 Transportation Plan.
And the 4 2040 comprehensive plans for Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and Hillsborough County.
Our communities, our cities, our county, our region. I mean, think about how your life right now has been shaped by plans put in place many years ago. And the exciting thing is, this time it's your turn.
This is your time to work for a high quality of life for the next generation.
Your turn to forecast a brighter future for Hillsborough County.
Come on, let's work together to make better connections between people and places.
Work together to turn the challenges that come with growth into opportunities for a thriving future.
Time starts now. Go to imagine2040.org to call the plays on the future of Hillsborough County.
Tell your family and friends. Talk about imagine2040.org with your neighbors and coworkers.
Join me on Facebook, on Twitter. Let's talk about imagine2040.org.
Let's design Hillsborough's future together.
Together. Together.
Together at imagine2040.org.
Visit Imagine2040.org today to design a brighter future for our tomorrow. This is a limited time opportunity to design a vision for Hillsborough's future together. This offer for those who live, work, or play in Hillsborough County will expire on October 20th, 2013. For more information, visit...
Okay, we'll stop it there. So we're pretty excited about our approach to updating the comprehensive plans and the long-range transportation plan. This time around, we're doing some things a little bit different than we've done in the past. We're starting with asking for everybody's input on what the future direction should be. We've also worked really closely with our 4 local governments in a way that, in my experience, we've never done before, and coordinated with this effort as well. And so I'm very proud to be able to share with you about Imagine 2040 for those reasons. The input we get through this process will really help answer some of those questions that I saw on Mr. Merrill's slide about what and where do we want things to go, and where do we want growth to happen, and what types of improvements for transportation we want to go with that growth. We've really, as I said, coordinated closely with Herb and Eric and all 4 local governments to ensure that this meshes with the other things that are going on, things like the Envision Plan in the City of Tampa, this effort here with you all, to pull all of those together and make sure that our comprehensive plans and the long-range transportation plan are fulfilling those visions and carrying all of those forward. And your guidance will be key to that, and giving us sort of that 30,000-foot policy direction of where we need to go, and then you're going to be helping figure out how we're going to implement all of these plans. And we've got a lot of challenges to look at, a lot of questions to answer. I've heard Mayor Buckhorn talk many times about wanting his kids to stay here in Tampa, and that's it's what it's about, is the next generation and how we plan for all of them. What we're presenting in this process is 3 different scenarios of how we could grow and develop, and they're a little exaggerated. No one of them is expected to be the plan. They're strategies and illustrate different choices we could make. Things like a suburban dream where we continue to have patterns of growth similar to we've had over the past decades. A bustling metro where we focus all of our investment in predominantly in redevelopment and around transit. And in new corporate centers, where a strategy where we might focus along our major interstate highways with express toll lanes and new business parks with residential development nearby. And what we want people to do is go to Imagine2040.org. We've got a really robust and interactive website there. It will go live on Friday. It's not live right now, but it allows people to look and tell us about their priorities for the future, what matters to them, and then evaluate each one of these different strategies on how they perform against their priorities. Tell us a little bit about what they like and dislike about each one of those strategies. And our hope is that then we will take at the end the best of all 3 and create a hybrid scenario that then becomes the blueprint that we use to update our comprehensive plans and our long-range transportation plans. If what we hear from folks is that we want to see some more growth around Plant City, then we need to start planning for what the infrastructure needs are to coordinate with that. If they want to see some redevelopment in certain areas of the county, again, we need to start planning our policies to encourage that and not make it harder for developers to go into those areas. So right now we are kicking off our outreach efforts on Friday. You all should have received an invitation a couple of weeks ago to our kickoff at a Friday from 10 to 2. We'll be in the lobby. We have a media event at 11 a.m. A couple of you all are speaking at it as the chair of the MPO, and I think Mayor Chalora is going to be speaking there as well. You also got your little goodie bags with some different promotional materials. In there, there's a stack of rat cards that we hope you hand out to folks who you interact with, and direct them to go to our website and do this interactive activity and give us their input. Really, the success of this will be in us getting the word out to folks that they should go and participate in Imagine 2040. We do have a couple other ways to weigh in besides the website. We have 3 kiosks that we're going to be rotating around the county, particularly to areas where we know there are populations that don't have a lot of access to computers. So places like malls, neighborhood service centers, each of the universities we're getting out to as well. We also will be going on the road to civic events, meetings. If the Rotary Club wants us to come speak, we'll be there. Would love to hear from folks if they have ideas about presentations. You will be seeing a newspaper insert in all of the papers on August 18th. And again, I can't reiterate enough how important it is for you all to help us share this, because we really want to get input from a large, wide cross-section of the community, more than we've ever gotten from our typical, roadshow with a couple public meetings type of thing. We really want to get beyond that and design our plans to serve the citizens of Hillsborough County. And thank you very much for letting me share a little bit about this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I saw Chairman Devin this week, and she told me, one of our challenges here is there's so much going on in this county and trying to get it all together. And so I won't ask a walk-on item. I asked Phil to give you just a quick update on an activity that's Hart's going to engage in very quickly that's important for our work here. So, Phil.
Thank you. Part of the process that Hart has been engaged in over the last 18 to 24 months is we've been listening to all the conversations that have been going on, and we're required by the state of Florida, or actually FDOT, to submit what's called a transit development plan every year. We have been diligently taking all the comments, the input, and everything that we've picked up, and we've encompassed that into our draft TDP. This will be presented to our Finance and Government's Administration Committee this coming Monday or next Monday, and try to get the information or get feedback from our committee, and then we will advance it to our Board of Directors on September 9th for approval. Once that's approved, then we submit it to FDOT. Now, rather quickly, I will be very upfront. It's bus-centric, and it does include the vision plan of part of this process is up to 6 Metro Rapid routes throughout the county. I would highly encourage everyone behind me and here is that if all possible, if you could attend the FGA meeting on Monday as we roll it out. I've also been asked, is it published? I can't publish it till I present it to my board. I'm sorry, but that's it has to go to my board first, and at that point, but we will put it on the web, our web page, I hope tomorrow afternoon, as part of the committee package that will be set up for our Monday meeting.
Thank you. Any questions of Phil?
What time is your meeting?
Okay. This concludes sort of where we're trying to hear perspectives from business folks. What we're going to do in our next meeting is we're going to start drilling down into the various key economic spaces and look at what your current capacity is, what the needed capacity is going to be, layers, what's being built by other folks right now, and then what are the gaps that we're going to need to fill in. So that's where we'd be moving to next. Commissioner Sharp.
First, I wanted to say that I thought that the opening presentation by the city and county managers and Mr. Hale was one of the best openings I've heard in the years I've sat through these transportation conversations. So I want to thank you. But I do have just 2 quick questions with regard to the actions we're going to take, the necessity for us being on a firm and fixed timeline, so that those that are going to be making very important decisions, the MPO's 2040 plan does depend upon some of the steps we're taking, and will look to the federal government for dollars. They need to know what we're doing, and that's going to have an impact on the federal return to our community of our tax money going out. So I need to know when the MPO is going to need our results from this activity so that they can make decisions for their 2040 plan.
Okay. Where is Ray or Beth? Would y'all care one to respond to that? Thank you. Any comment on that?
Good afternoon, Ray Shermonti, MPO and Planning Commission Director. We would need that information by May or June at the latest of 2014 to help us be able to put together the plan, to have some idea what funding we have. Just so you understand, the MPO plan has to be cost affordable. You have to identify where the funds are coming from. You don't have to have them yet. It could be something in the future that's reasonable, at least the federal government considers to be a reasonable possibility it could happen. So that's what it's based on. You have a needs plan, which is not the official MPO plan, and then you have the MPO plan, which has identified funding sources.
All right, Commissioner Hickenbottom and Chairman David.
Were you finished?
Well, I wanted to make sure that with, so for the MPO, you're saying as late as May or June?
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later, does that help you?
Of course, yes.
And
the sooner the better.
And then the Mr. Hale, with regard to the TBD, the TDP.
Bill, can you come in?
If we were to, if the HART board makes the determination that they want to go with the more aggressive plan, and we recognize that bus demand has been busting at the seams, that's going to require more funding. Do you have have you analyzed funding, and are you looking at where those funding sources might come from?
Yes, we are in the TDP, which will again roll out. We have a costing forecast for each of the specific Metro Rapid routes, additional service, and we also have in the TDP a document that does some projections on alternative funding sources.
And I'll close by stating again, I want to thank you for this meeting, but with the MPO very clear about their 2040 plan, HART talking about their transportation plan, the conversation about baseball, the conversation about port expansion, Mr. Lopano aggressively working on his activity. There are a lot of game changers here. I just hope that we're going to be on a firm timeline so that we don't lose an opportunity where we know there's activity to make a significant difference.
Well, Commissioner, you left out one player that I think we need to hear from sooner rather than later, and that's the Florida Department of Transportation.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think before we
Thank you.
can go much further
That was
in any
good.
kind of planning, we need to talk to the DOT and know what their plans are.
Thank you.
You're absolutely, both of you absolutely correct, and we're in the process now of trying to arrange that conversation and ensure we have that data.
I think it's critical to moving on
Sure.
anybody's plans or ideas.
And our hope is, when we have this discussion in September, we'll be able to show you what DOT is planning. And we may be able to have a representative here, but at least you'll be able to see it, so we're not talking
Oh, I think
about
it's
it.
very critical that we have DOT people here.
Okay, all right.
Should they be on the commission?
Commissioner Higginbotham?
Yes. Let me get closer. I have found value and merit to the meetings to date, and have talked from the very beginning about the importance of input from all the community. And last week, you did a noble job with facilitating, but I will tell you that the feedback I got from the community, from constituents, is they felt cheated. By no reflection of you, but for the fact that they did not have an opportunity for formal presentation like we've afforded manufacturers or CEOs or other technicians. And I think that if this is to continue on a positive track, that you have to have those people afford them the courtesy and the opportunity to sit at the table, just like we've done with these other high-powered folks. I can't remember the name of the young man who's with Connect Tampa or Tampa Connect. I know he's here. But his group, he says he's got 3,000 members in his organization. I think you ought to sit at this table and be afforded the courtesy that we've provided. And there's a group that has a different opinion. But if we're not going to do that, I think we're wasting our time. But I certainly think that it's important that we afford this community that opportunity in this type of setting to have those groups like we rotated in today in one of these meetings. Otherwise, we're going to hear the same thing, that is, you didn't listen to us. And I will receive emails again, as I'm sure those others of you said, you were hiding from us. But I want to, I've gotten nice professional smiles from you and nods. I want a commitment that we're going to have a formal meeting with that 3 or 4 groups, and I misused, the word I used last time was Tea Party. I'm not looking for the political organization. Whatever group that is in opposition to these discussions, I want them in here. They're not going to misbehave. If they are, we got security. Or those who are proponents of the initiative. I want them in as well. But we need that, and I want to know if we're going to have them on calendar and when.
Can I get some direction from the council about that?
Well, I think we had this conversation heard before, and it was a mistake last time, as I expressed to you and Eric that we were not there to listen to the public and to take the public input, just as we are taking input from manufacturers and others. So I just want to make sure that we have a public calendar and time set up. We talked about at different milestones where we'll be out in front of the community to receive their input and feedback as we're putting forth plans. And I'm in agreement with Commissioner Higginbotham. I wouldn't mind having an appropriate a couple of people up here that would represent different points of view from the community sitting up here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Higginbotham, and I think you've done a pretty good job of trying to keep this as a holistic process and a very transparent process, and I'm not going to critique that. It's just I think as we move forward, we need to make sure that there's a lot of different dynamics to this subject, and we need to make sure that we're all inclusive to all of those dynamics. And and it's good for us to hear the pros, the cons, the positives and negatives, and to make sure that we also reach out to the potential urban dwellers. There's a guy that comes and talks before the PTC and the Board of County Commission on a time-to-time basis, Vinny DeFurro, who's past president of the Advertising Federation, and he lives downtown. And his interest in the subject is as a local resident, along with several other local residents downtown, and generally has interesting things to say. And I think we should be hearing from those people as well.
Absolutely.
One quick thing. I just want to thank the speakers we had today.
Yeah.
I
I'll make a motion if we
appreciate
need
them being frank with us and saying how they feel and being factual in their comments. Even when we tried to lead them in certain directions, they were like, no, this is where we're going. Last thing I want to say is that I hope that, even though I know this is based on transportation, Commissioner Hagan, I love the idea of the incentive program. I don't know if that's going to continue in this format here or another topic, but I hope that gets expanded somewhere. And I sure hope that we have more discussion about the incentive program for business expanding within our own community, okay? So I hope, even though this is transportation, I hate to see that get lost somewhere along the line because I think it goes hand in hand. I would like to say, because I talked a little bit earlier about our city manager and his folks on economic development. I mentioned the company that was looking at expanding in Orlando. Well, through his hard efforts, they actually expanded in Plant City instead. So I do know those efforts, and we do reach out to our own companies and look at economic development, get them to expand locally. We can win there more so than getting reloads, just like C.J. Evans said. That's it. Thank you.
Sure, and I'll make that if you would like specifically a motion that in one of these 4 dates that you've outlined, that we bring back these groups.
I don't need a motion for it. I got direction for you. We're committed to doing it.
Very good. Well, I'm willing to make one, but if you've got the direction and there's a consensus.
I've got direction from you.
I actually brought it up when they did my briefing yesterday. I said, we have to hear from these people. This will not be successful if we don't hear from them. And I think it's critically important. Thank you for bringing it up.
Now, I want to reiterate what Commissioner Higginbotham and Commissioner Merman's saying as far as ensuring that we're hearing from all perspectives and differing opinions on the modes of transportation as well as the funding sources here. At the same time, I would encourage there to be as many public meetings out throughout the county, particularly in the unincorporated areas, Brandon, Plant City, South County, Carrollwood, similar to what MPO, Hart, Planning Commission, they always, we've done this before, they've always had these meetings, and it should be very similar to that in the public, so that they'll have ample opportunities to weigh in, because not everyone can come downtown and things like that. So, and last thing I'll say is, I support what's up there as far as a conceptual process or a blueprint moving forward. However, I am opposed to self-imposed timelines just for the sake of having it. If there's a need because of a trigger, such as an MPO statutory date or something we have to guide by, that's one thing. But to move fast, just to move fast, I think is ill-advised and will be a recipe for disaster. So.
And let me, as Mike used the term conceptual, these are dates we at the staff level will be trying to have stuff prepared for, but we do not want to cut or restrict your conversation. If you tell us we need another round on that, we'll take another round. If you tell us we're moving too slow, we'll try and speed up. But this is more of a staff planning, trying to make sure we have stuff ready. We'll take your direction as to how fast you can get out of this building. Let me do say, just for everybody else, the next public forum will be September 16th. The format is we're going to have all the managers come and talk and engage with the folks the same way they made those brief comments to you today, but they'll be open for that. If it's your pleasure, we certainly, it's open. Y'all show up if you'd like. However, we're trying to have a structure of these meetings so we get certain things accomplished. And the two things we want to get there would have an interaction with the managers and be able to spend some time talking about the growth scenarios, because they're so important to the transportation discussion.
I'm sorry, Herb, you said the 16th. I'm looking at just the agenda upcoming meetings, and it says September 25th. Is that a different meeting?
That's the public forum, Commissioner.
On
Your
the
next
16th.
meeting is September 25th. Yes, sir.
So we're having another public forum on the 16th without our presence there?
No, sir, I just said if y'all would like, if you want to be there.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
All right.
We held it to the 16th because one of the requests was give us as much lead time as possible. So, we tried to respect that. It will be somewhere out in the county. I don't know where yet. We're searching for the right site. But certainly, you come, but we're not trying to turn it into a conversation with you. This is trying to be a conversation with the managers.
Can you make sure our offices have the details on that? Because I don't have anything around our calendar
Eric,
on
can
that
you
yet.
remember that? Anything else for the good order? Thank you very much. For those of you trying to beat the rain, please move.
What's going to happen?